Types of libraries and how are they funded? There is no such thing as a typical library. All libraries share the core purposes of collecting, organizing, preserving, and sharing, but beyond that, they can be very different. Each one has a particular purpose. Each one has a particular audience. Each one exists in a particular environment. Aside from the personal library, each is generally connected to an institution or organization of some type. Let's look at each of these types and see what the difference really is. School libraries. School libraries exist to provide materials to students of various ages. Elementary school libraries tend to collect books for early readers, both fiction and nonfiction. They provide teachers with materials for teaching students of that age. Audience. Children and teachers at the school would be the audience for the school library. When you think about it, first graders and high school seniors need very different types of materials. Thus, the librarian needs to know the audience, and they need to know them well in order to provide what is needed. Even when there is no official library, which happens way too often in this era of budget cuts and downsizing, there is often someone who will do their best to provide materials for the children. The photo in the bottom left corner shows someone doing just that for a school in rural India. Environment. They may be fancy or plain. School libraries often have colorful decorations, such as the one in the top left corner of this slide. They may have stuffed animals such as Clifford the Big Red Dog or Curious George to celebrate favorite characters from the books. In the elementary school library where I once worked, there was a huge bathtub with cushions in it that was a favorite place for children to read. Libraries in middle schools or high schools may have more tables for working or stations for group work. The furniture also tends to be appropriate to the sizes of the children involved. Children's libraries, or the children's section of a public library, are also geared to the sizes, interests, and imaginations of children. These places are colorful and welcoming. They are places that encourage children to discover new things and the world of reading. A love of reading at an early age sets children up to be successful students and to be lifelong learners. Public libraries vary widely. Some are large and ornate. Some are very small and simple. They are in large cities, rural areas, and small towns. The needs of these populations are very different. The mission of a large public library in an inner city might include programming for children, teenagers, senior citizens, or homeless people. The collections would also reflect these things. Public libraries need to consider their audiences, many of them. In rural areas, it may be difficult for people to get to the library due to lack of transportation. The collections are geared to the needs of the area and may include things other than books. One rural library has collected various expensive farm tools, and people can come to check them out whenever they need them. Hospital libraries. Special libraries are connected with things such as hospitals, law offices, businesses, or other organizations. For 5 years, I worked in the United Hospital Center Library as a health sciences librarian. The audience was doctors and nurses. They needed materials to keep up to date on current health information. They needed to do continuing education. One of the special collections that I worked with there was the collection of mannequins used for CPR training. I had to be sure that we had plenty of lungs in the sizes needed for different mannequins. This is certainly not something that I had considered while in library school. Medical students came in to do research, work on projects, and to write reports. People often assumed that I was the librarian in charge of a book cart to take around to the patients. In a time when infection control is such a problem, I would think that would not be a good idea. One of the most interesting things that happened while I was working there was the day that a doctor called from the operating room to request an article that he had read the week before. It contained a new method of wrapping a specific type of injury. I found it, and he sent an aide out to get it. Law firms often have libraries. Who is the audience for this type of library? The lawyers and their research staff. They research case law, but also the various types of things lawyers might need to support their own clients. Can it work to use the defense from stealing because your client suffers from obsessive compulsive disorder? Where can you find those experts to come in and testify about such things? One way is to read articles in law journals, medical journals, psychology journals, etc., and contact the people who wrote them. Law libraries are places with a defined audience. They do have core legal resources that they need to have, but other than that, it depends completely on what cases are before the lawyers at any given time. Academic libraries are attached to a college or university. They provide raw materials that faculty need for teaching and students need for learning. These materials are the tools that they need to do their jobs. The examples below are about the Annie Murner Pfeiffer Library, but include things that you would be likely to find in any academic library. The collections will vary depending on what is being taught at that particular school and what the faculty finds to be necessary. The place is vital as a gathering space as well as just to hold the collections. In our library, there is a quiet floor in order for people to be able to hear themselves think and to focus on their work. The first floor includes places to serve as gathering spots for group work, a cafe, and a reading room in the back to serve as a place for programs. In many ways, this serves the same purpose as the ancient Greek agora, or town squares in Europe, where people come together to find out information, talk about it, buy food, and be entertained. The services include education, helping people to know what we have and how to use it. A reserve, in order to be sure that materials will be available when they are needed. Interlibrary loan, to get access to things that are not in our collections. Printing, copying, faxing, scanning, and the all-important Café Libros. Yes, we consider this a service. It is interesting to think about the things that happen in all of these areas. Faculty and students obviously interact in classrooms, advising, and on research projects. Faculty and library communication is vital so that we have what they need and that they need what we have. Students and library interact in many ways. The materials that are used and the services, like teaching them how to use it, that the library provides. In some ways, the library serves as the laboratory for students to interact and to connect with what they have learned in the classroom, and to work on creating new work as well when working on projects and writing papers. Another example of an academic library is this one at Northwestern University. After my graduation from West Virginia Wesleyan College, I worked here for 2 years. Each tower has 5 floors. Each one has a different type of material. This made it easy in a way to direct people to Tower C, 3rd floor. Tours of this library take about an hour, and all employees were required to do a certain number each semester. My position here was a split position. Mornings, I cataloged albums in the music and poetry listening library. In the afternoons, I was one of 5 people working in the reserve room. While working full-time at Northwestern, I was also a full-time graduate student at Rosary College, now called Dominican University. This is the inside of the library at Rosary. It was also a very new experience for me, as it was not organized with the Dewey Decimal System that I was accustomed to. Here I was working on my master's in library science and getting used to using the Library of Congress classification system, an education all in itself. So are these things libraries? Is there a collection, a place, service? On the top left is something that is familiar to many. There is a collection, although very narrow and small. It is a place, possibly a service if it is somewhere very convenient for people to stop by. Red box for books. Read box. In the middle of the top row is a bookmobile. Again, the collections are narrow and small, perhaps specifically designed to serve people in a particular area. The place, it brings it to the people. Service? Definitely. In fact, it is not unusual for public libraries to have very interesting collections. The library on the top right side of this slide offers a toy library. Mothers in the area realized that they would spend a lot of money on toys for their children, and then the child would outgrow the interest quickly. So, instead of having a closet or a basement full of unused toys, these mothers brought them all to the library, which collected, organized, and shared them. Now they can check out the toys and bring them back for more age-appropriate ones when needed. Libraries have done similar things with seeds, cake pans, video games, etc. There is no limit to the types of collections you might find in public libraries. Here is an assignment. Click on the picture of the Biblioburro to look at the movie. Write a journal about what you find in Journal Responses for Module 3. Library architecture is a very interesting thing. At the beginning of this class, I asked you where you were from. This is because your image of a library will be different depending on the libraries you have experienced. The Seattle Public Library, bottom left, is very modern. There is a lot of light. Some are ornate and make a person feel the pull of art and history just by going inside. One of my favorites is in the bottom right of the slide. This is a library that has been a huge part of my experience with libraries, as a student, as a staff member, and as Director of Library Services. It is also one that we share. Your experiences may be very different from mine, but it exists to serve you and to provide you with the raw materials and tools to do whatever it is that you are working toward. Go to this website and learn more about what libraries actually do. Read some of the stories about how lives have been transformed. Include your thoughts about this in Journal Entry 3.2. What might have been interesting, surprising, or inspiring to you? Do you have iTunes? You have a library. Do you have a Kindle or other e-reader? You have a library. Do you have a cell phone or tablet? Then you have access to many, many libraries. In fact, you have more computer power in your cell phone than NASA did at the time they landed on the moon. What are you going to do with all of that power, all of that information? There are collections of audiobooks, electronic books, databases. The place is wherever you are. And service, many have interactive chat services, reference services, and other ways to tailor the collections just for you. Founded in 1996, the Internet Archive is an important example of what a digital library can be. Working with the Library of Congress and the Smithsonian, as well as many others like West Virginia Wesleyan College, it collects and preserves very old things electronically, and collects and preserves things such as films, music, computer programs, and even electronic games. You will be exploring this great organization more in a future lesson. Here is a website called Library Spot. It claims to break through the information overload of the web and bring the best library and reference sites together with insightful editorial in one user-friendly spot. Go to this website and see how it may qualify as a library. What is collected? Who is the audience? Is this a service? Report your findings in Journal Entry 3.2. What might have been interesting, surprising, or inspiring to you? Where do the funds come from? Who pays for all the resources and services? It all depends on the organization. Public universities generally receive tax money. Private colleges, like West Virginia Wesleyan College, rely on tuition money and friends. Between cash gifts and gifts of books and materials, we generally average over $15,000 per year from our generous friends. The State Library Commission does provide us with some resources, as their mission is to provide for all libraries, public, academic, school, in West Virginia. All libraries are probably members of one or more groups of libraries called consortia, which band together to get better prices from vendors, as well as to help each other in other ways. We are certainly not alone. Libraries are very networked places. Our library receives information, resources, and valuable professional networking from various places, including the West Virginia Library Commission, the Appalachian College Association, and OCLC. Let's look at these a little closer. The West Virginia Library Commission provides many resources and services. They are things that might be helpful to a very broad range of libraries and library users. There are health resources. There are things that would be helpful to K-12 schools. There are some literature resources. There are newspapers and magazines. Job Career Accelerator is a resource that helps people to learn about jobs, how to prepare for them, and how to apply. Learning Express Library helps to achieve your educational and career goals. These are powerful tools for the people in West Virginia. Other states have similar resources available. The Appalachian College Association is very vital to the work we can do here at the Annie Myrna Pfeiffer Library. It is known as the ACA. There is a core collection of resources that we all receive thanks to a grant from the Mellon Foundation. We can get discounted rates on databases due to our collective student population numbers. Together we have 54,000 students, roughly the size of Texas A&M. We have joined a shared catalog which saves us in the neighborhood of $30,000 per year. There are staff members at the ACA offices who help provide training, technical experience, and collaborative programming. There is even a new thing called the JSTOR Patron-Driven Acquisition Program. This is only available through the ACA. We receive access to tens of thousands of electronic books from scholarly presses. We can use them all we want. We don't pay anything until a certain number of chapter views or downloads occur, and then the ACA has funds to purchase them, for all of the ACA libraries. This is a win for the writers, win for the publishers, win for the libraries, most importantly, a win for you. Libraries work together in ways that most people would never suspect. Some of the ways we work with OCLC include cataloging resources for organizing, Content DM for preserving and sharing our history on Pages in Time, more on this in a later lesson, and ILLiad, the interlibrary loan function, which allows us to borrow books from libraries all over the world so that you can use them if you need them. The world's libraries, connected, powerful. To review, there are many types of libraries. Each one has a purpose or mission. Each one serves a specific audience, generally connected to an institution or organization. No two are alike. Libraries serve a variety of people, and the funding varies depending on the institution or the organization involved. Libraries have working relationships with other libraries, local, regional, national, and worldwide. You have finished the interactive lesson on types of libraries. Be sure that you have written Journal Entry 3.2, which will include your thoughts about ilovelibraries.com, libraryspot.com, and your overall thoughts about this lesson.